Ancient parables still have relevance in today's complex world. Buddha once got 4 blind men to describe an elephant. The one who felt the tail thought an elephant was like a rope. The blind man who felt the stomach thought it was like a wall. When another one felt the feet, he thought an elephant was akin to a pillar. The last one thought it was like a piece of cloth, just because he felt the ear. All were right from their own perspective, but still grotesquely wrong. A perfect analogy for today's world, where faulty perceptions fuel contemporary discord. This short film is about how Canada is perceived by Pakistanis. It is hoped that this one example may serve as a microcosm of opinion for other Muslim nations as well. Canada needs not to question its own identity, but should seek to understand whether its own unique values have been understood by some parts of the developing world. In recent times, one of Canada's fortes has been its welcoming stance towards immigration. One important group of immigrants happen to be Muslims from around the world. Currently, there are 400,000 Muslims in Canada, of which 79,000 happen to be Pakistanis. For Canada to understand Pakistan and Pakistan to understand Canada is important not only because of immigration, but also because the world is becoming ever closer. And in a world that is still tumultuous in its politics, understanding is now at a premium. So what is Pakistan? To most, it is a nuclear power. To others, one of the most populous Muslim countries of the world. It is a developing country with huge income disparities, much poverty, and a very low literacy rate. Its political system has been fragile since inception because of continuous interruptions by the military in its parliamentary system. It is today at the center of global politics because of its geographical proximity to many strategically significant countries. Fringe groups and contemporary governments have tainted a picture of how the West sees Muslims and how Muslims see the West, especially post-September 11. Canada is integral to the Northern Hemisphere and has a rich Western heritage. Before we can look at how Pakistanis perceive Canadians, we need to understand how Pakistanis look at the broader picture. That is, what do Pakistanis think of the West?
غیر مسلمه کوم دین او هغوی زموږ د مسلمانانو لکه په هر ځای کې خلاف دي سپی وي او لکه ظلم پې کوي نو موږ دا لکه هغوی ته دغه کوو چې تاسو مطلب دا مسلمانانو سره ظلمونه مه کوئ
اوس لکه مسلمانان چې کم راپاڅېدل کوم دغه کوي نو دا هغو مجبوراً اخر دې هر ته رسېدلي لکه تنګ شوي دي نور اسلام کې دا دغه نشته چې ته د کفارو خلاف داسې تنګ نظري او دغه نشته
लेकिन हम जो है उनके मुतालिक अच्छा ही ख्याल रखते हैं हमारी सोच उनके मुतालिक एक ब्रदरहुड की तरह है
زمون خو خیالات ای د پاره داسې ډېر بد نه دي خو چې زمون خرابول غواړي نو بیا ظاهره ده مونږ هم وایو چې هغوی مونږ خراب کړو مونږ سره جهاد وکړو
It's a problem we face in our country because the majority of the people have no idea of what the West is. they think of it as a monolith, as if the whole of the West is the same, one and the same thing.
One of the problems with all this current conflict which has developed in the 21st century has been the questioning of the motives of the West in many issues. The attack on Iraq, was it based on good faith or was it maliciously contrived?
If you are saying an impression, a general impression, the West is anybody who is white, anybody who's Christian is West for them. There is a feeling that the Christian world, so to speak, is ganging up on the Muslim world. And unfortunately, politics does not make that any easier.
यहूद और नसारा जो हैं वो कभी मुसलमानों के दोस्त नहीं बन सकते.
Pakistan, I think, wants to blame everyone else. You know, the Jews or the Americans or the Indians.
Then it's much easier to kill somebody who you believe is not just less than you, but who is dangerous. And therefore, dehumanization inevitably leads to demonization.
مسلمانانو کوم داسې فرقې راغلي چې د خپل مفاد لپاره غیر مسلمو سره زیاتې کوي چې کوم د اسلام نغه نه دی تاریخ نه دی.
They are arrogant. They just think about themselves. They don't think about anyone else.
Some of the mistrust of Muslims towards the West can be explained as a reaction towards feeling of suspicion from the West towards them. This acts as a senseless rationale for animosity. To understand this, we must know what Pakistanis think the West thinks of them.
Terrorists.
Terrorist people.
Terrorists.
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 They are quite biased of Muslim people.
The general perception in West is that Islam is a backward religion. It breeds extremism and it's undemocratic.
Now neither the Western world likes, I'm talking very generalistic now. We don't like each other. The West doesn't like us and the Muslim don't like the West because of policies. But they both need each other because of pragmatic compulsions.
I think a lot of it when you talk about Western perceptions of the Muslim world, for some reason which really irritates me, it focuses on the way women dress. Dress has become a political issue which, if somebody's covered up, if somebody's wearing a burqa, they must be an oppressed woman. Which is quite bizarre because I think wearing a boob should means that does not mean you are liberated.
In the West, feel that we live, in some ancient times, and that a lot of things that we see in the West are things that people in this part of the world are not exposed to. Pakistanis in general have a lot more exposure to things than we used to, and I don't exactly see that the West can observe that at the moment.
In contemporary times, there is a generalization or a general tendency to perceive Muslims as less scientific, less empirical in their process of thinking, in their reasoning, and therefore more barbaric.
One of the dominant themes of recent politics has been the lack of trust Muslims have towards the United States of America. The United States is a constant fixture in Muslim consciousness. Given its role as a leader in many fields of life, it has cast a shadow over Canada. And in some ways, some of the recent negativity attached towards the United States may be overflowing to paint an unsavory picture of Canada based on ignorance. How do Pakistanis think Canada and America differ?
Just the simple word, I.
I think the educated people can, especially the people who have been given the English medium education, which is only a small elite. But I don't think the majority of the people would understand that.
You talking about layman?
Yes.
No.
Huh?
You said that you could make a distinction between Canada and States.
Yeah. I could. That's because I've had a lot of exposure. I've been to States and been to England and all these places. But an average layman person, he doesn't have any exposure.
कनाडा के मतलब तो मेरा इतना कोई खास नहीं है
इनकी पॉलिसीज जो हैं वो सियासी हैं ठीक है ये जो शुरू से रहे हैं मुसलमानों के खिलाफ
नो غير دينا خلقت له कनाडा لمسلمان خلاف
You ask 9 out of 10 people will not know what the maple leaf is all about, but they certainly know what the stars and stripes are all about.
So it's very unfair sometimes to lump them all together. There's such a heavy ambience of the United States on Western policy that they usually get lumped together until they stand out and get themselves singled out.
Americans are a little more aggressive and more into this war things and going into that. But as far as Canada is concerned, he's not bothered.
There's a lot of difference between the two. America is perceived as a supporter of Israel. That is not true of Canada.
US also, it's not that they dislike American people as such. You know, it's the force of the administration. It's the fear of the administration.
Foreign aid always generates a great deal of debate, but with debate, it is also a force of generating goodwill. How can Canada use its foreign aid programs to identify itself as a distinct nation? How and where can Canada help?
I think it should be in education.
Education.
Tertiary education and primary education both.
Anywhere but the military.
Yeah.
Then comes, of course, any help in the infrastructure, building small dams, because clean drinking water is a huge problem in Pakistan.
For instance, the first major dam that was built in Pakistan was the Warsak Dam, and that was Canadian. And for that, a cement factory also came up. And Canada, I think, figures as a major donor to Pakistan also.
Not that we'll give you X amount of foreign aid and in, sort of in response you have to buy our exports.
We've never seen Canada coming in, charging in on a white steed, holding up a flag of peace, which is, I think, what it needs to do.
We started off with a story from Buddha, and we'd like to end it by looking at an age-old philosophical question. If a tree falls in a forest, and there was no one to observe it, did it make a sound? How can we know? This question looks at the existence of phenomena outside our ability to observe it. If we pose this question for Canada, it gives us much food for thought. Canada is progressive, multicultural, and a possible force of good and stability for the world. But if people don't know this, does it matter?
Harsh sun cracks, fragile clay, parched lips from poison air.